Welcome to worship at First Presbyterian. We at First Presbyterian practice a spacious Christianity, which means no matter where you are in your faith journey, you belong and there is space for you at the table. There is space for your doubts and questions. We believe doubts and questions are a gift that invite us into deeper conversations and a more authentic faith. We believe diversity is a strength. Every story is sacred and everybody matters. We do our best to live the spacious and radical love of Jesus, so that all might have a chance to flourish in this world. We are so glad to connect with you in this way. We would also love to worship with you in person if you're ever in the neighborhood on Sunday mornings at 8:30 or 10 a.m. and never hesitate to reach out to us to learn more about us or how we might support you. I hope you enjoy this worship service. Welcome.
Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Days are breaking in my soul. Oh, where are dear fathers? Oh, where are dear fathers? They are down in the valley of praying. Days are breaking in my soul. Oh, where are dear mothers? Oh, where are dear mothers? They are gone to heaven a-shouting. Days are breaking in my soul. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Days are breaking in my soul.
The spiritual life is to live in radical amazement, grateful for the gift of each sunrise, each moment, each breath, taking nothing for granted. Jane Kenyon's poem, Otherwise, reminds us to take nothing for granted. Jane Kenyon died of leukemia at the age of 47. She wrote this poem shortly before her death, with a profound sense things would soon be otherwise for her. I got out of bed on two strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, ripe, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birchwood. All morning I did the work I love. At noon I lay down with my mate. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed in our room with paintings on the walls and planned another day, just like this day. But one day, I know it will be otherwise. We're continuing our worship series on what makes a good life. What makes a good life is knowing that someday it will end. Confronting our own mortality can actually lead to a deeper embrace of life and an awakening to the gift of each breath and the gift of every single heartbeat. Rabbi Abraham Heschel said, our goal should be to live life in radical amazement, to get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. It's not just another day. This day is a gift given to you. To be spiritual, he said, is to be amazed. Being in conversation with death can lead to living life with radical amazement, taking nothing for granted, helping us remember what's really important in life. In her poem, When Death Comes, Mary Oliver contemplates her death, and it helps her realize how she actually wants to live. And she wrote, when death comes, when it's over, I want to say all my life I was a bride, married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. The psalmist in Psalm 90 wrote, teach us to number our days, that we might gain a full heart of wisdom. The psalmist is suggesting we would have more wisdom to live well if we were willing to talk openly and honestly about death and what it might mean to die well. You know, we live in a death-denying culture. And what I've noticed about our refusal to become friends with the reality of death is that most of us are unprepared when it comes time for our own transition from what I call this life to more life. And most of us are unprepared and unequipped to accompany those we love in meaningful and healing ways at such critical and sacred moments in people's lives. And how easy it is to take the gift of life for granted. So today I am deeply grateful to have an open and honest conversation with Elizabeth Johnson. Elizabeth is the co-founder and executive director of a community-based organization called the Peaceful Presence Project. She's a sister, partner, bereaved mother, and lover of honest conversations. And her current favorite word is intervulnerability, because of the healing potential that exudes when we actually meet each other in those deep, very human places of vulnerability. So Elizabeth, welcome. And I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad we can have this conversation. And I thought we might begin by inviting you to tell us a little bit about the Peaceful Presence Project. I mean, what is its mission? What's its vision?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's great to be here with you. So the Peaceful Presence Project is a community-based organization. We have our roots here in Central Oregon, but we work statewide. And our mission is really about reimagining and transforming the way that communities talk about, plan for, and experience the later stages of life. So experiences of illness, of death, of grief. And our vision is really about creating a culture where every community member has the ability to receive compassionate, equitable, end-of-life care. That we're really centering those experiences, and as communities, all stepping in and playing a part in the care for those that live alongside of us during these more challenging windows.
You mentioned reimagining. Can you say a little bit about why we need to reimagine?
Sure. Well, just as you opened up with, right, we live in a culture that simply does not enjoy remembering or standing close to the reality that we're mortal beings and that this will all come to an end at some point. And I think that, you know, we've really, in so many ways, beautifully brought in more medical interventions to make our lives easier and oftentimes to prolong life. But also what's happened in that is that we have I think, change the narrative around the dying process to say it's not our we don't have the ability or the empowered stance to really know how to be in the dying process with the grief process. And so reimagining it is really about kind of changing the narrative and rethinking what our relationship to those essential life experiences, what that looks like.
It sounds like in some ways it's a shift from oftentimes we view death as in some ways a failure. Even from the medical perspective, it's a failure,
Yeah.
as opposed to seeing death as actual part of the developmental process of life.
Yeah.
And how do you think reimagining death in such a way might change our relationship to our own dying?
Well, I think about it in the arc of the life, right? That there, as you said, there's these very integral pieces of learning, of wisdom development, of coming closer and closer to who we are as souls in the world. And those later stage windows being so essential to that learning. Yet we don't want to spend time there. We don't want to linger there, right? We can talk about an age-friendly community, but we have a hard time talking about death-friendly communities. And yeah, so I think that the reimagining is really a reclamation of the arc of our lives and saying that it all matters, right? We need to have a relationship with each and every day, all the way through that last breath, right? And the Tibetan Book of Dying reminds us that in order to live well, we need to know how to die well. So we start at the end of that life, and then we work our way back into the middle of our lives, where we find ourselves today.
Yeah, kind of reminds me. I think part of how I define spirituality isn't necessarily about getting our beliefs right or making sure we've earned our ticket to heaven, but it's really about awakening. Awakening to a greater reality, but also awakening to ourselves, awakening to the gift of each breath, awakening to the gift of each heartbeat. And part of what I'm hearing you say is to befriend death in some ways is to awaken us to the gift of life. I've heard you talk a lot about compassionate communities model. I'd like to learn a little bit more about that, and particularly how we as a faith community, how such a model might be important for us as we are with people in times of illness and dying and death and grief. What is the compassionate communities model?
Yes. Well, this is the model of care that our organization is actually founded upon. So it's compassionate communities model of care. Oftentimes it's referred to as public health palliative care. And really what it teaches us is that experiences of illness, death, dying, grief, bereavement, all of this really is the responsibility of communities, right? That we've relegated those care experiences more to social services or the health system. But really, it's about transforming and, again, reimagining the role that communities can play for one another in these spaces. And one of our teachers, Alan Kelleher, reminds us that death and dying are social events with medical components. We've been taught, right, that they're medical events that have the secondary or tertiary social event. But really, how do we recenter this and say that we all have an essential role to play for one another? There's also something known as the 95-5 rule that research shows that when an individual is navigating a serious or terminal illness, typically only 5% of their time is spent face-to-face with a medical provider. So the question for all of us, right, is what are we doing with that other 95% of the time? What's happening in that space? We know, right, that death and bereavement, these experiences are at the core social, they're relational, they're spiritual. And so I think I think there's a good news aspect of the compassionate communities model of care, which is that we all have a very empowered stance to play in that space for one another. And I think especially for faith communities that already have these existing threads of connection, right? That we're asking ourselves, what happens in those in-between spaces? when somebody is home, right? What happens after the memorial occurs?
Mm.
You know, we oftentimes are focused on the event itself, the dying, the coming together and celebrating a life, but what happens after that? And I think faith communities are just so well positioned to come into a room together and ask those big questions around how else might we care for one another in these big kind of transitory windows that will happen to all of us. Grief and death will happen
Right.
at the center of all of our lives.
I mean, just what a transformational idea that, I mean, we in the faith community, part of what our mission is about is being the presence of what we would call in the Christian community, being the presence of Christ's love
Mm.
in people's lives. So this whole idea that that even the dying process and death, not necessarily being a medical
Mm-hmm.
event, but a social event,
Mm-hmm.
and that we actually have the responsibility, as well as the sacred privilege, to show up
Mm-hmm.
and to be a presence of love and care and healing in such sacred and critical times.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of reminds me when people say to me, I'm going to go and be with the person I love, they are dying. I often offer a blessing. I often say, may you be graced with everything you need to be the presence of love that you desire to be.
Mm.
And it's easy for me to offer that blessing, but then, well, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
So what is the practical wisdom and the resources that we might need to be that presence of care, to show up, to accompany people,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be illness or dying, or even after someone dies in the grief process?
Mm-hmm.
What is that practical wisdom and the resources we need to accompany in ways that are helpful? Because we certainly can accompany people in ways that are less than helpful.
Right.
So
Yeah.
what is that wisdom or the resources that would be helpful?
Well, I think the first sort of challenge of this is that it starts with us, right? I think back to early on, I had the gift of spending about 2.5 years in India. And I remember a Rinpoche from a Buddhist Rinpoche saying to me, remember, always keep death close.
Mm.
And I thought, wow, what does that mean? You know, and then I was down in South America and somebody came to me and said, you know, to keep death as your compañero, your companion, to always feel death there somewhere on your shoulder.
Mm.
And I think that we have to have a personal willingness to do the work of remembering the impermanence
Mm.
of this life that we have. We cannot sit alongside at bedside of an individual who is dying and be there well without actually having done the work ourselves, right? That I am not othering, but I understand that your experience right now is my experience because that is the heart of our humanness, what we share here.
Mm.
So I think that's, the first step around all of this is what does it look like to integrate some level of practice on a daily basis that continues to serve as this very gentle but true reminder that this will all end, right? There's another interesting aspect of this that, we know that the brain technically categorizes death as something that will only happen to others. And I think it has to do something with the self-preservation piece of us continuing to go on.
Yeah.
So we have to sort of meet that with this intentional practice of being in our lives and knowing, I too will die someday.
Right.
I too experience grief. And so I think that's a essential starting point. We oftentimes, I think, kind of sell ourselves this story that I don't know what to say to make this better. I can't go in the room because I will not have the right answer or the solution to offer up to this person who is dying the good death. And, I think a lot of our work is about remembering that, we hold within ourselves exactly what it is that another needs, and that is presence, as you said. So, I think that's the second piece is what does it look like to become comfortable enough in ourselves in the silence in the sacredness of what it is to share that space with somebody and to enter the room from that place.
Right.
My presence here, being here, the simple presence of me is more than enough. And to know that most people who are navigating these experiences are experiencing the opposite of that, this disenfranchisement,
Right.
this alienation, isolation, retraction, right? We feel a fear in the face of death and grief, right? Because it reminds us of our own mortality. And so to really to know that you are at the core enough. And then third, there's something referred to as death and grief literacy, this competency that we can develop that really helps us to have just a more kind of grounded sense of what it looks like to show up. And that's about, non-medical symptom management that we can offer for people. Coordination resources that are available just to say, great, we're going to do the food. We're going to, to have the people come through and sit bedside and pray with you. We're going to, all kind of the logistical realities that are really difficult to hold for a family or an individual in these spaces. And so there's just a lot of learning that's possible there. And that's something that we as an organization are really attempting to bring back into the community, the practical wisdom that is available around these spaces.
And I love that it kind of starts with recognizing that your very presence is a gift. In a sentence or two, what would be your prayer, your blessing, your wish for us to be able to think about what it means to die well so that we might actually live well?
Well, I would love for us to remember on a cellular level that we need one another, that there is this intervulnerability that is at its core the power in these spaces, and to match that with, but also remembering the fragility, the fragility of life, right? And I think at that intersection, we find so much potential, so much love.
Yeah, I love that. I often think it's not our strength, it's not our successes that we share in common. What we share most in common is the salty taste of our own tears. What we share most in common is our vulnerability. And that the human soul doesn't want to be fixed, saved, solved, converted, controlled. The human soul wants to be seen and heard and affirmed. And I think it's meeting each other. I so agree with you. I think it's meeting each other in those sacred spaces of vulnerability that we are able to see and to be seen.
Yeah.
I want to share this beautiful, I'm a big fan of John O'Donohue, and he has a book called Bless the Spaces Between Us, as you know, and he talks about death in this book, and he says, may you quietly befriend your death so that you will have no need to fear when your time comes to turn and leave. May the silent presence of your death call your life to attention, wake you up to how scarce your time is, and to the urgency to become free and equal to the call of your destiny. And may you gather yourself and decide carefully how you now can live the life you would love to look back on from your own deathbed. Elizabeth, thank you so much for the work that you do, the beautiful, important work that you do. And thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you, Stephen.
Let it go, my love, my truest. Let it sail on silver wings. Life's a twinkling, that's for certain, but it's such a fine thing. There's a gathering of spirits, there's a festival of friends, and we'll take up where we left off. it sail on silver wings. Life's a twinkling, that's for certain, but it's such a fine thing. There's a gathering of spirits, there's a festival of friends, and we'll take up where we left off when we all meet again. Oh, now didn't we? And don't we make it shine? Aren't we standing in the center of something rare and fine? Some glow like embers, like a light through colored glass. Some give it all in one great flame, throwing kisses as they pass. East of Eden, but there's heaven in our midst, and we're never really all that far from those we loved and miss. Wade out in the water, there's a glory all around, and the wise say there's 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Oh, let it go, my love, my truest, let it sail on silver wings. Life's a twinkling, that's for certain, but it's such a fine thing. There's a gathering of spirits, there's a festival of friends, and we'll take up where we left off when we all meet again. Yes, we'll take up where we left off when we all meet again.
I offer this blessing from John O'Donohue. May you experience this day as a sacred gift woven around the heart of wonder. Friends, go in the peace and love of Christ. And may the love that you bring into this world bring peace to others.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed this worship service. If you would like to make a donation, helping make these podcasts possible, or support the many ways First Presbyterian seeks to serve our community, you can make a financial gift online at bendfp.org. Every week, we hear from someone thanking us for the gift of these broadcasts and what a difference they make. Your support makes that possible. Our church is committed to reach beyond our walls, bringing hope where there is despair and love where it is needed the most. Your generous support helps us to be generous in love. Go to our website, bendfp.org, and click on the link Give Online. Your support is really appreciated and makes a difference in people's lives. Thanks again. I hope to see you next week.